Always. Well, it is Advent. Hard to believe, but this is the first Sunday of Advent, and we are now looking forward to the arrival of Christmas. Now, because this is day one and you are here, you're prime candidates to be present every Sunday of Advent, and I want to encourage you to do it. Don't let it get away from you like it did last year or maybe does most years. And so you come to Christmas Eve and you wonder what happened and you're not ready. Sundays at First Baptist Church will help you get ready. So come every Sunday, the next three after this, and then join us on Christmas Eve. 2 services on that night. The place will be filled both times, and we'll just have a wonderful time together. Make church your priority. And when you come, every Sunday, you'll see us light yet another candle on our Advent wreath, and you'll see Christmas getting closer and closer. And it's a wonderful way to teach your children what it's really all about. So do that. Let me give you another piece of advice. As we are now entering into Advent, let's try to unplug a little bit from all the social media and all the internet and all of that. That can be so distracting, always, but certainly now. This is a season for actual human interaction. What that means is you're with somebody and you're looking them in the eye and you're talking to them. How's that for novelty? Yesterday I was at a stoplight and I looked over at the car next to me, and there was a woman and a man, and they both were on their cell phones at the same time, doing something, checking email, texting or something. I mean, I put my phone down just to look at it. It was incredible that they could have been talking together, but they were doing that. Now, you got to check your email, but don't check it every 15 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 times during the day. And avoid surfing online. You don't really need to see the 10 child stars that grew up to be fat and ugly. You don't need that. Just do what you have to do and focus on people. And one more suggestion. This season, more than once, maybe once or twice a week, sit down together as a family and watch a Hallmark movie. Can you do that? I'm pushing that this season. The sermon series is entitled A Hallmark Christmas. But watch those movies. Now, I know they are sappy and they're predictable and not very true to life. I know all of that. But they're still wonderful movies. Audrey and I will watch them, and minutes before every plot twist, I'll announce it. Now watch, this is about to happen. And sure enough, it does, like clockwork. You can pick who the romantic interest will be early in the movie. You pick the 2 most attractive people in the film. They're going to get together. And it almost always involves a department store that's failing because the boss has lost the true meaning of Christmas, and somebody has to save the day. And one of the 2 love interests will be a widow or widower, and there'll always be a child involved. But always at the end, there will be that magical kiss. Now, I know it's not true to life all the time. There's no profanity, no sex scenes, any of that. But it's good, wholesome entertainment. And it reminds us of how pure and true love can be, because we've forgotten that. And it brings us back to those things we've lost. This summer, Audrey and I had the privilege, we were vacationing with some folks out in Southern California in Los Angeles, and we had the opportunity to spend a night and a day with the people at Hallmark Movie Channel. We had dinner with Lori Loughlin and Bailey Madison, who were in a movie this weekend, a North Pole movie, and they're wonderful Christian people. And to sit down with Bill Abbott, the CEO of Hallmark, and then spend the whole next day with him and hear his heart about what they're trying to do at Hallmark. He said, Don, you wouldn't believe the pressure we are under to make our movies less wholesome, to go along with the times. But we're resisting it. And he said, we're the #1 movie channel in America, #1 cable channel in America during the Christmas season. So I feel like we ought to support that. They're trying They're trying to make a difference. Like I say, the movies come around to reminding us of basic things and reminding us about hope. And that's really what I want to try to do. Every sermon this Advent season will have a Hallmark movie title, which will have absolutely nothing to do with the sermon. Okay? But it's a way to get into the message. And so today I want us now to gather around the sacred word. Go back to Isaiah chapter 9. And Heather read this for us so well. Chapter 9, beginning at verse 2. We're not doing one today, and it's rather unusual because most Sundays when you come, we have a parent-child dedication service. Parents will bring their little one, and we'll pray over that child. And many times, and you've heard me say it, many times I will say something like this. When a baby comes, this little one right here, when a baby comes, that is proof that God has not yet given up on mankind, that he still has something great he wants to accomplish, and maybe through this little baby. And I believe that with all my heart. I believe that about your children. They've got a future. God's not given up on the human race. There's something great yet to be done. Well, that was certainly true with the birth announcement we read in Isaiah chapter 9. It's a royal birth announcement. Usually, oftentimes in a Hallmark movie, there will be somebody from a royal family who is trying to get away from that. Sometimes it's the prince, sometimes it's the princess, but they're escaping and they're mingling in with the commoners, and true love happens. Well, this is a royal birth announcement. And if the birth of any baby gives hope, certainly the announcement of a crowned prince or princess gives great hope. You remember back just a handful of years ago now when William and Kate had their little baby boy over in England, the crown prince. His name was George Alexander Lewis of Cambridge. Royal babies have a long string of names, as we'll see in our text today, a long string of names. But the baby can make a difference for the nation if it's in turmoil. That baby can make a real difference for a monarchy that is struggling. A baby was born a long, long time ago. Isaiah tells us about it before it had actually happened. 700 years before Jesus was born, Isaiah wrote about it. And he was looking forward. Now we're looking backwards, but it's the same baby. It's the same story. And it starts in the darkness of night. A dark, dark night. Most stories begin something like that. It was a dark and stormy night. Look at what the text says. Men walking in darkness. Maybe you were on the road, maybe last night trying to get home, or the other night, and you were driving at night. You remember how it is when you're hour after hour in the car and it's dark out there? For you, darkness is more than just the absence of light. Eventually, that darkness becomes a living thing itself and creeps into the car. You feel it. Or maybe you're the one at home waiting for somebody to arrive, and they're running late, and they're coming from a great distance. And every so often you go to the window and you lift the blinds and you look across the horizon, you look up at the corner and you're waiting to see headlights, and you see some, and you're wondering, could this be it? And the car goes right by. It's not the one you were waiting for. And so you wait. And sometimes the darkness is a darkness of waiting because bad news is coming, and the dread is already seeping into your life. Men walking in darkness. It is a dark world out there. Darkness of chaos and war and suffering. And the biggest darkness of all, people who don't know Christ, have never heard his name, and do not have a Christian anywhere around them who can tell them about him. That's the darkest darkness of all. Usually in church, when we talk about darkness, it's a negative thing. And it probably is so here, a negative thing. Darkness is shorthand for everything we want less of in our lives. And I know this is not a Hallmark movie, and maybe you're not living in one right now. It is a dark time in your life. I want to pass on to you something I got from Barbara Brown Taylor. She says that darkness is not always a bad thing. God can be at work even in the darkness. If you're looking, God can appear even then. You're in Isaiah. Go back to chapter 45 for a moment. Isaiah 45. In the first several verses, God is talking to Cyrus, a Gentile ruler, and making various promises to him. But look at chapter 45, verse 3. He says to Cyrus, I will give you the treasures of darkness, riches stored in secret places. Treasures in the dark. Maybe you're in a dark period of your life right now. Could there be treasures there? Could God be there even though you don't feel Him or sense Him? Think about the stories in the Bible that take place in the darkness. Page 1, there's darkness everywhere. And then God says, let there be light. But it all starts in darkness. Think about the founding of the nation of Israel. Moses going up to the top of Mount Sinai, and there's a thick black cloud that descends. And God is in it. And God speaks to Moses and gives him those 10 commandments. When God first called Moses, it was out of a burning bush. There was light, but the deeper in the relationship that Moses goes, the darker it seems to get until God speaks. In the New Testament, Nicodemus, who learned that he had to be born again and that new birth is possible, and received the promise, for God so loved the world, He gave His one and only Son, that whosoever would believe in Him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Nicodemus came to Jesus at night after the sun had gone down. And then Jesus ascends with Peter, James, and John to the top of Mount Hermon. It's nighttime. They're praying. But out of that thick darkness, Jesus begins to glow, and He's transfigured in front of them out of darkness. And let's not forget Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. The sky was dark, no stars except for that big one out there. And suddenly the night sky explodes with angels announcing the birth of Jesus. If you're in darkness right now, nobody relishes that, but I want to tell you that God is even in the darkness. And to be invited in to meet Him there, well, it's scary, it's unsettling, but to be invited in to meet Him there is quite an honor. And you will learn things in the darkness maybe you'll not learn any other way. It was a dark, dark night, and men are walking in darkness. But look what happens. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. It's a dark night, but now a bright light. Because eventually, the light does come. And eventually, Jesus came to that dark world. It's thrilling news. It's unexpected news. And isn't the best news that which you were not expecting? The surprise. You were expecting the worst. You're just made that way. You're kind of pessimistic. You're expecting the worst. And then you get good news, and it is surprising. Or you open the present, and you're not expecting much, but you open it, and you see that it's what you've always wanted. You didn't know you always wanted it until you saw it, and now there it is. And so Christ came to a dark, dark world. The light came on. I often talk about Audrey, and I shouldn't today because she's not here, but I don't guess that makes any difference. I'd talk about her anyway. I was talking to our pastor's Bible study last Sunday night, and I don't know how we got on this, but we were talking about love at first sight, and I began to tell them about the night I met her in my very first church, a Sunday night in September. There were about 50 people in the room, and I'm preaching, and I look, and she walks in the back door. She's a college student, and she sits on the back row, and it was love at first sight. Now, the problem is I don't believe in love at first sight. I preach against it, and I warn young people about it, but it happened to me. And I told the group last Sunday night that many times I wish I could get in a time machine and go back in time to 5 minutes before she walked in that door and just try to remember what my life was like before everything changed. And everything changed for me then. And when Christ came, everything changed for me and for you. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, we go out of darkness into his wonderful light. It's a dark night, but then a bright light. And what a glorious sight it is. Look at what is said in these very familiar verses, verse 6 and following. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. That could be mere repetition. That's often what you find in the Hebrew Bible to make a point. Repetition, saying the same thing in a different way. That may be what's being done here, but I think there is a distinction. For to us a child is born. That's Jesus 2,000 years ago. The little baby, God in human flesh, born in a manger. To us a child is born. To us a son is given. You see, Christ had always existed. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him nothing was made that was made. John chapter 1. He is eternal. But then once upon a time, the eternal Word of God became a baby. And the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called. And talk about royal babies with long names. Look at this one. He will be called Wonderful Counselor. And I know the old King James makes that 2 names. Wonderful Counselor. But you can put them together. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing it and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. Notice first that this is very personal. Oftentimes we watch the news, and I know here in Washington our local news is what the national news is. But we watch the news and something is happening in Paris or something is happening in the streets of Chicago, and it's somebody else's problem. We're burdened by it. We're concerned. We grieve with them, but it's not us. We're reading about news that doesn't impact us. This is very personal. For unto us a child is born, a son is given. Christianity is not just an idea. It's not just an event from long ago. Our faith is a personal relationship. Please don't miss that. When we invite you to come to Christ, we invite you to enter into a relationship that is real and vital. And if that's never happened for you, it can happen for you today. You can give your life to Christ and he becomes real. Because you see, he didn't just do it for the world, he did it for you. This is personal. And it's powerful. The government will be on his shoulders. Powerful. He's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He is the seat of all authority. Now, we don't have a government like that now. And you're not going to have one in 2016 with the presidential election, whoever you vote for. You'll vote according to party or preference or convictions, but I'll tell you now, you're not going to be electing a Messiah. It's not going to happen that way. We're talking about the day when His kingdom comes and His will is done on earth as it is in heaven. Now just imagine what that would be like. Imagine what our country would be like, what our government would be like if God were on the throne. If Jesus were the Lord, imagine. Well, we don't see it now, but we see glimpses of it, and here's one place we see it. We ought to be able to see it right here in our church. This should be a place where the government is on the shoulders of Christ, that it is His church, and we do what we believe He wants us to do. Another place where His government can be real is in your home, where you live, in your relationship, husband to wife, parent to child, child to parents. Jesus as Lord there. Wherever you have a Christian who can pray the Lord's Prayer, Thy kingdom come, you ought to be able to see it beginning to come right there in that spot. It's powerful. Amazing things can happen. And it's peaceful. One of His names, Prince of Peace, and of the increase of His government and peace, there will be no end. Look at verse 5. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. There will be a day, we're not there yet, but there'll be a day when we won't remember war anymore. And implements of warfare won't be put in a museum. They'll be completely destroyed because the Prince of Peace is here. And there'll be righteousness and judgment. That's what our world is crying out for, where you see people marching in the streets and where you see protests. There's a lot going on. I can't understand it all, but at the heart of a lot of it is people just want justice and righteousness. And all of us want peace in the world. This war-torn world that's catching up with us. It's headed our way. We're praying desperately for peace. And one day, the Prince of Peace will make it happen. And one more thing I see here, it is perpetual. Of the increase of His government and peace, there will be no end. He is the everlasting Father. It goes on forever. Talk about living happily ever after. That's how Hallmark movies end, with the implication that they lived happily ever after. Well, that's what God has in store for us. This kind of happy ending where peace is in place and where Christ is Lord. Now, I don't live in a Hallmark movie, nor do you. We've all got troubles in our lives, and our world is exceedingly troubled. But this is still the birth announcement we give you today. Because a child has been born and a son has been given, and though all the implications are not readily seen, it's all in the works. This is Advent, and the word Advent means coming. And so when we use that word at church, we're talking about the coming of Jesus. And usually we're talking about the coming of Jesus in Bethlehem. He's coming. And so every week we grow in anticipation. But there are two Advents in our Bibles. Don't miss this. Two comings of Jesus. The first one, but the second one. The second one, when Jesus comes back to the earth. He's coming back one day. And that's when all of this will come true. You see, the prophet Isaiah is writing hundreds of years before anything had happened. And he's looking forward in time. As a prophet, led by the Holy Spirit, he's able to do that. And he looks out into the future, and he sees two great mountain peaks. And from his distance, it looks like they're the same range. They are one and the same. What he cannot see is the valley between them. But you and I, we're living in that valley right now. And sometimes it's dark. But he did come, and he is coming again. And when we believe him and trust him, then it becomes true for us. This is God's word for us this